Ask friend if he knows anyone who had access to some tools I needed to finish a project. He says sure, he knows a guy from work that would be happy to help. Apparently, he was interested in the same kind of art, but he warns me he's a bit off. Drive friend to work one day. He introduces me. Guy seems really distant and withdrawn. Shakes my hand and we chat a bit. He seems real interested in the woodwork I was doing, and we talked about sculptures and such for a little while. Things we'd learn, tools we use, etc. Guy warms up a bit, and I ask him if it would be alright if I checked out some of his stuff. He hesitantly agrees, kind of like when you're trying to come up with an excuse but you just can't. Tells me to swing by that night. We can chat over a few beers. Okay, sure. Later that night, I get a call. It's the guy. He sounds a little shaken up. Says things are chaotic at home right now, and right now isn't a good time. He says he'll call me sometime. Whatever. Sure, man. 2 weeks go by. The guy calls one afternoon. Says things have settled down, and he wants me to bring over some of my work as well, to compare and blah, blah, blah. Sure, dude. So I start to head over, and notice this guy lives in the middle of fucking nowhere. I had to call him up just to find his house. It's at the end of a long driveway. Beautiful acres of land. The driveway is littered with trees, and his house is actually pretty nice. As I come up the driveway, something strikes me odd about the trees I'm passing. They all have faces, carved into them, facing the driveway. Twisted, pained faces. I didn't think much of it. I make morbid stuff myself, and in fact, I was very impressed. The amount of detail was staggering. Looking out onto the tree line of the property, every tree had a painted face looking on the house, almost like the woods were watching you wherever you were. This actually kind of creeped me out. Looking out was like seeing hundreds or so white faces just crying out. Kind of like they wanted your attention. Knock on the door. Guy answers with a beer in hand and a much friendlier demeanor than before. Helps me carry some stuff in and shows me around. Guy seems pretty cool. Begin to notice each room has one of the same damned faces hanging on the doorframe. The more I saw, the more I felt sick. Up close, the faces were more detailed than I had imagined, almost surrealistic. I asked the guy what his focus on the faces were for, and the guy kind of tenses up and dodges my question. Upon entering his workshop, which was fucking sweet by the way, he seemed to have other interests besides creepy faces. Entire 7-foot sculptures of women, men, animals, etc., all very well done, and one with the tarp in the back, just chilling there. He says it isn't done yet, so I don't bother. It was right in front of the door that I think led to another room. We began working on stuff, trading stories, and times we had accidentally injured ourselves. Suddenly, subject changes. Guy asked me what I think about God. Tell him I'm not very religious, but I don't rule anything out. Guy starts getting loud, saying that God is a blatant lie. He was told so. By who? He kind of silenced for a moment, and then abruptly asked me if I believe in spirits. Gave him kind of the same answer. It's possible. He starts looking around the room, as if seeing if anyone is around. Then his voice goes soft, and he kind of whispers for a moment. I see things in the woods, at dusk. I see their shadows. Sometimes they whisper from trees, and I can hear them. Fucking nope. Obviously, Guy is mentally disturbed. Egg him on, ask him what they tell him, etc. They tell him that God is a lie. Only thing after death is darkness. He says they laugh at him, and leave dead animals at his tree line. Officially creeped out at this point. He said for a while they visited him at night, and each face represented a different spirit that had visited him. Says they can't stand looking at themselves in death, so they don't step within the tree line. Thus, why has the entire thing carved out? I'm pretty silent at this point. I hadn't had goosebumps this bad since I was a kid, and chills just running up my spine. He told me they talked to him from the tree line at night and tried to get him to leave his home. I eagerly try to change the subject. Guy looks down and just keeps talking. He's pale as a sheet, and was obviously genuinely terrified. He even looks like he's kind of welling up. Tells me I'm the only person he's told. Knowing I'm a stranger, he apologizes. Says he's scared and doesn't know what to do. I try my best to awkwardly console the stranger, and the guy actually kind of starts to break down. I think he needs help, but it's not my place to give it to him. Regrettably, ask him why he's afraid. Says the faces don't work anymore, and 2 weeks ago, he saw something terrible in his living room. Huh? He walks over to the tarped sculpture and pulls the tarp off to reveal the most mangled, terrible thing I've ever seen. It hardly resembles a human being. It was terrifying to have imagined this guy seeing it standing in his doorway. Shortly after, a loud bang on the wall to my right. I nearly jumped out of my skin. This guy doesn't even flinch. Then again, bang. and it just continued on and on continuously, like hail hitting a tin roof. The guy screams, "Stop it!" and it ceases. After I grab my shirt, tell the guy I'm sorry, and got out of there as quickly as possible. As I'm leaving his home and driveway, I look into the rearview mirror. The tree line is darker than I have ever seen. Guy calls a week later and apologizes, says he was silly and everything is okay now. Friend says guy quit and was never heard from again. Moved to Kentucky for fire service. Buy 10 square miles of hilly forest with home at an auction. Old owner lived there his whole life. Died on the land. Family sold it to make a quick buck. Start planting more trees. Forest is dense but could use more around the house. Put up trail cams because of homeless wanderers coming onto property. Something is getting angry and ripping down all the trail cams from behind, including the ones high up in trees. Find piles of them in tree hollows. Grab shotgun and camp supplies. Head out to find homeless man and persuade him to leave my property. Can't find anyone, only tiny four-toed prints in the mud by the streams. Thinks a raccoon, but spacing makes me think it was standing up. Make a camp and hunker down. Cook up some tasty stewed rabbit, get into tent and go to sleep before cleaning pot because of how tired I am. Wake up around 3 in the morning, moon shining through trees. Hear weird grunting sound from outside a tent. Sounds small. Open window flap. Stew pot is swinging, but I can't see anything near, except for a mossy rock about the size of a gallon jug that I didn't notice before. Think nothing of it. Go back to sleep. Wake up. Go over to stew pot to cook some breakfast. Stew pot has been licked clean. Mossy rock is gone. Think that raccoons must have cleaned it in the middle of the night, and the rock was the fat lump that did it. Pack up, search some more. Can't find anyone, but swear the moss around me is alive. Notice that rocks seem to be moving whenever I look away from them. No sense of dread, just bewilderment. In the search somewhere, I lost my knife that I had for a while. It's cheap, but it has a lot of sentimental value to me. Get home, tired and bummed from not finding anyone and losing my knife. Go to sleep. Wake up to light knocking on my door. Get up kinda groggy and open the door, eyeing where I keep my gun, just in case. Peek through the window. No one there. Grab my shotgun, open door, and poke my head through, in case it was someone visiting their new neighbor. No one, only forest noises and the occasional butterfly. Step through door and feel my foot kick something. Look down. My knife is lying there, on a small bed of flowers and grass. Look around, really confused, but happy that someone found my knife. Then angry that someone was on my property and watching me. Shout as loud as I can a quick thanks, and if they're there, to come out and see me now so I can talk to them. Notice about 3 rocks, all around the same size and shape of a milk jug, in a row on the border of the forest. Pick up knife and walk back inside. Glance outside. Rocks are gone. Buy a border collie when I go into town that day. I have more stories about these things if anyone wants to hear about them. Okay, about a month later since finding my knife in the porch, planting more trees, working some land to make a small garden. Pupper named Hugo was walking around sniffing things, doing puppy stuff. While tilling, I noticed 2 rocks on the edge of the forest. Think nothing of it. They don't bother me. I don't bother them. Kind of getting used to it and expecting them by now, to be honest. I don't feel afraid. Hugo doesn't seem to mind them. Start getting really into my garden. Lose track of time and look up to find Hugo to take him inside with me for a break. Hugo's gone. I'm freaking out because I love the little guy. Look around frantically and see him by the edge of the forest, sniffing one of the rocks. The rock he's sniffing shifts a little when his nose gets too close to it. I get up and run over to Hugo to keep him from getting hurt or something, in case a rock tips over on him. That's when I see the moss on the rock shift and sprout a tiny, spindly arm. I stopped walking for a second and blink to make sure I'm not seeing things. It's hot and humid and I haven't been drinking as much water as I should. Arm continues to extend slowly and tentatively towards Hugo, recoiling a little whenever Hugo's nose touches it. Hugo is wagging his tail and generally seems to be enjoying it. I get about 10 yards away when I step on a twig and make a loud sound. The creature's arm shoots back into its body. The rocks start tumbling away frantically. Hugo runs after them. I run after Hugo. I lose sight of Hugo and search for him until nightfall. I'll go back to my house to grab a flashlight and my camping gear to find my pupper. As I'm getting close, I see a white and black lump on the porch. I start running towards my house. As I get closer, I see that it's Hugo. He's laying in the porch, not moving. I'm getting more and more upset. As I get closer, I see red and pink around his neck. I start sprinting, thinking my dog is hurt or dead. I get 10 feet away and about to bound up to the porch when Hugo jerks his head up and looks at me. He stands up and comes to greet me with a slobbering mouth, clearly happy to see me. He has a little crown of red and pink flowers around his head and neck, and has a rope tied to his collar and my door. I hug him, tears welling up because I've come to love this pupper so much. Stand up, shout a thank you to whoever brought him home. Go in and go to sleep. I've been on this property for about 4 years now, and I have lots more stories about them if people are still interested. I've gotten very close to them. I'm trying to build up my trust with the little things. About a year later, I keep seeing rocks around my house, and they're getting closer and closer. Notice one is living in my garden now. A little different from the others, greenish-gray and very round, almost spherical. Every now and then, I take a peek out the window and catch a glimpse of it moving around, very slow and methodical. Garden has never looked more beautiful since I moved in. I go to my garden often, and see it on the opposite side from me all the time. Decide one day to go up to it and try to show it I mean it no harm. I am unsuccessful at this. It just tucks its arms and legs whenever it sees me. Looks like a chubby sloth carved out of stone, but no mouth or nose from what I can tell, just two beady little eyes. I decide to leave it alone. It seems to be helping me with the garden, and I appreciate that. Notice that sometimes some of my veggies will be gone or half-eaten, and sitting by the stones. Let them have it. Leave some veggies near the edge of the forest. One day, notice the stone is gone. Veggies are no longer being eaten. Garden is looking a little worse for wear. Stones are gone from the tree line. I'm genuinely sad that they're gone. About 2 weeks later, go into the forest looking for them. Come to the middle of my property where a massive tree has fallen, with some kind of oak, possibly around 100 feet tall. When I get closer, I notice that there are dozens of stones on it and around it, all leaning on it like they're kissing it or resting their heads on it. I'm overwhelmed with a sudden sense of sadness, almost like a family member died. I walk over to the tree and place my hand on it and whisper some sweet nothings to the stones. I go back home after spending almost 3 hours at the tree, feeling almost bereft of an old friend for some reason. Remember, I have a white oak sapling in my yard outside my house. Dig it up and take it to the bigger oak tree in the forest the next day with Hugo. Plant it next to the fallen oak so that it will replace the giant hole the older one left. Hugo is walking around the stones. Caught a glimpse of a few petting him. A few days later, notice the stones are back on the edge of the forest. Garden stone is back, and everything looks lush and vibrant again. I have one other notable story that was kind of scary. I'll type that out. I guess it's not really scary, but it does involve a crazy homeless guy. Going to the forest one day with Hugo to look around for bums, say hi to friends, and just be outdoors. Notice more and more signs of a homeless person living there. Trash everywhere, broken branches and plants, etc. Finally make it to where I think the guy's living. Find the shelter and take it down, but neatly folded for him so we can get off my property, and quickly. Starts getting dark, and I'm a little worried that I missed him or he's dead somewhere on my property. See someone moving deeper in the forest. Shout out to him to stop and to talk to me. The guy has a pickaxe, so I keep my shotgun ready in case he gets violent. I see he's smashing something with it. Freaking out, thinking I stumbled onto a killing. That's when I hear the unmistakable sounds of rocks being smashed. I fire into the air and get his attention damn quick. He drops his pickaxe and puts his hands up, mumbling something unintelligible. My adrenaline is pumping, I'm shaking, and Hugo is going mad on his leash. I scream at him about smashing rocks. He starts saying how they were following him and throwing stuff at him. I almost shot him then and there, but instead I led him at gunpoint to the edge of my property and told him to get out and never come back. A few days later, I get a call from the sheriff's office about a body they found near my property. Homeless guy, beaten to death and stuffed in a tree. Tells me that there will be a deputy coming to talk to me. Deputy shows up about an hour later, questions me about if I had any interactions with the homeless guy. Tell him no. He leaves. Turns around my porch, mentions my stone fence is looking a little low, but it looks good. Look around. See the entire edge of the forest around my house surrounded by stones. Tell him thanks, and see him do his cruiser. He leaves. I look back at my house, all the stones are gone, except for 2. I've got a lot of small ones, like gifts and whatnot. They leave me flowers, sometimes memorial mushrooms, things I've lost, etc. I've been giving them about a third of my veggies, and they seem to like that. More and more show up in my yard, rather than the tree line. and only seem to move when they don't notice me. They're very slow moving, and the only time I've ever seen them move quickly is when they roll. I have a lot more animals in my area now, and the forest and yard/garden are much more lush when they are around. They seem to disappear during storms. I think they either go into tree hollows or patiently wait it out under other kinds of cover. The garden rock likes to go into a small covered trellis I built for it for when rain comes. Never heard them speak. I've only seen their face a few times. It's just an oblong rock with beady black eyes that looks like polished black glass. Very spindly arms and legs, not bony looking but more vine-like. They tuck back onto the body and aren't noticeable. 4 toes and 3 fingers and a thumb. Bodies are shaped like a bullet, and they are about the size of a gallon jug. The garden rock is more round, though. Their head sits in the front of their body rather than the top, and it kind of blends into it. The eyes are wide and spaced, almost parallel to each other, and about the size of a marble. They are covered in moss and can range from green to burgundy. I think that might indicate age, but I don't know. When they stand up and walk, they look more hunched over, and they tend to waddle more than just walk, with arms out like they're carrying something underneath them. There were a couple things left in the house, like some personal documents, mostly health notes. Other than that, I know the guy came from Holland, and that he built the house when he came over in the 50s. None of the family wanted the land. They just wanted to make some quick cash. I did let them spread his ashes in the forest, though, because that's where he spent most of his time with his wife. Her ashes were also spread out there. According to their daughter, seemed like a sweet old man. He liked woodcrafting, and I find some of his stuff here and there in the basement and the shop. I have to figure they made out on the porch, and the next day it was gone. Not sure if they took it or for some animal/vagrant passing through. I swear to God, I never believed any of you until I started reading these stories and suddenly made some connections. I swear to God, all of this is true. I live in Pennsylvania. I live just outside the city of Reading. There's a lot of thick forest around here, but nothing ridiculous. It's mostly suburbs where I am. Farther out, it's highways and farmland. Lucky for me, I live right up at the edge of a small community, at the very top of a hill. The forest is literally across the street from me. Anyways, somewhere around a year or two ago, my dad and I were having a personal chat about some recent tough events going on, when we suddenly heard a weird sound in the forest across the road. We both stopped and looked over. I don't think deer come out this light, I think I said. My dad just stared and looked kind of confused. Suddenly, we heard someone yell something like, "Help! I'm bleeding!" We both just sat there, staring into the woods where it came from. My dad stood up and said to get inside. We both rushed in, and I watched him run up the stairs and grab his handgun. My dad's a rough sort of guy, and always heads for his guns if he thinks something's going down. Something was definitely fucking going down. I opened our back door to the deck again. It was a glass door, and peeked out towards the forest to see if anyone would come sprinting out or something. Keep in mind, we're at the edge of the suburbs and not exactly used to hearing people scream bloody murder in the middle of the night. Then I heard it. This weird and loud screech. It was like a cat or a woman, but it definitely wasn't human. It was weird, like it was high-pitched, but not, and filled the entire neighborhood for a full 10 seconds before it suddenly went silent. I slammed the glass door shut and ran to the stairs just in time to see my dad stomping down in boots with his pistol. "Did you hear that?" I remember asking him, and he just nodded. We both headed out the front. By now, a bunch of our neighbors were coming outside, too. The scream was really fucking loud, but I didn't even expect all these people to come out this late. It was almost midnight. My dad went down the street and looked up at the forest. Another guy came up to my dad, and he had some kind of handgun, too. I watched them start chatting for a bit, until suddenly another one of those screams pierced the air. It was horrible and made me feel sick to my stomach. It went on for something like another 10 seconds and suddenly cut off. Like fucking idiots, my dad and this random neighbor decided to point their guns toward the forest and head in. I couldn't believe it. I mean, my dad is a hunter, and he'd been doing it since he was a kid. He's almost 40. I'd be damned if I do something like that. They must have been in the forest for a good 20 minutes, together, searching the darkness for God knows what. I sat outside with a bunch of neighbors that entire time, staring into the forest, waiting. Eventually they came back just fine. They stuck together the entire time, according to my dad. They thought they saw something like a tall guy in the forest at some point. When they tried to see if he was the one screaming, apparently he got on all fours and hauled ass into the forest. We were all shaken up, parted ways, and headed back into our houses. It was pretty fucking weird, and no police or anything ever checked it out, but eventually we all moved past it. A long while after that, there was a separate incident that I didn't exactly connect to the first. Later that year, I was sitting outside with a friend on my back porch. We were talking and having a grand old time dicking around when I saw my cat, Jinxie, pawing at the glass window. What a stupid cat, my friend said. I agreed with him and played with the cat, putting my fingers on the window while I pawed away at my finger, wherever it went. That's not what's weird, though. Later that night, I was in my room playing a game with my window open. My cat was somewhere in my house, along with all of our dogs, so I know he was fine. It's important to note that my neighborhood has a real problem with stray cats, though. Anyways, I was sitting there playing some games with my window open when I heard what sounded like a cat meowing outside. I paused my game and wondered if Jinxie had gotten outside. I went to my window to listen. I heard that meow again, but it was a long, deep one. The kind you hear from a cat when they're pissed and backed into a corner with their claws out. I recognized it wasn't my cat, but it was coming from the woods behind my house. So I stared into them and tried to see where the stray cat was at and what it was getting so pissy at. I recognized it wasn't my cat, but it was still coming from the woods behind my house. So I stared into them and tried to see where the cat was and what it was getting pissy at. The cat did that long, deep, angry meow again, and it sounded sort of close to my actual yard. I heard some shuffling in the woods, and then something weird happened. I thought I could hear someone talking, except it wasn't like a normal person's voice. It was like a mentally unstable person trying to mimic someone else really badly. It was something like, "Stupid cat." I immediately got creeped out, but seeing as how my window was on the second floor, I felt fairly safe to keep listening. Then I realized the voice was changing. "Stupid cat." It clicked. It sounded like something was trying to sound like my friend, but doing it really, really badly. There was a serious scuffle. I heard twigs breaking and the cat going apeshit. I mean, it was really screeching and meowing like it was fighting for life or death. Then there was this loud thumping sound. It sounded like something big and heavy smacking against something else solid. After that, the meowing stopped completely, and whatever was out there went dead silent. I was pretty creeped out by this point and shut my window and had real trouble sleeping that night. Nothing's really happened aside from one incident where I was getting a drink really late at night and thought I saw someone crouching really super low on my back porch and looking into my glass door. Like I saw light reflect off their eyes, like you see in animals at night or something. The door was locked, and it really freaked me the fuck out and made me sprint to my room and wake up my dad, but he didn't find anyone or anything. I've been assuming it was just me being scared from all these stories on X. Now that I've read all these stories, I'm freaking the fuck out. I've never seen one about something really even remotely close to these things happening around my area, but I'm freaking the fuck out. That shit was literally in my backyard, but yeah, that's all I got.